لله الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيدنا محمد المصطفى وعلى آله الأمجاد وأصحابه الصدق والصفاء أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يتوكل على الله فهو حسبه صدق الله العظيم قال الله تعالى في شأن حبيبه الكريم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. Dear brothers and sisters, friends and elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we got to know in our previous khatira, the importance of halal rizq, the importance of halal provision, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said and commanded His messengers that you have to eat from what is tayyib, what is halal. Ya ayyuhar rusulu kulu min at-tayyibat. That, O my messengers, you have to eat from what is pure, what is tayyib, what is halal. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if you want to be a mustajabu da'wat, when Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu anhu, he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, Ya Rasulullah, pray for me that I become mustajabu da'wat, the one whose prayers, whose du'as are never denied and it's always accepted. It's called mustajabu da'wat. Ya Rasulullah, make me a mustajabu da'wat. Rasulullah said that if you want to be a mustajabu da'wat, then every morsel that you put in your mouth, make it halal. Everything that goes in your mouth, that goes in your stomach, should be from halal source. Then you will be a mustajabu da'wat. And Rasulullah also said that if a flesh, a body, a meat which is nourished through haram sources, through haram income, will be a part of Jahannam. Will be a part of Jahannam. It's that the body is worthy of Jahannam, but not for Jannah. So it's very important that we get the income, the source of income should be from the halal mean. And then if you want to prosper your rizq, there is something that we need to focus on. It's the tawakkul of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the tawakkul ala Allah. That's the reason why Allah is saying, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. That whoever relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he is sufficient for him. Tawakkul is very important. And it's a part of our faith. It's one of the fundamentals. That tawakkul, the trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very important. And if we see that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human beings, the animals and the birds, if we see the other creatures, they go in the morning, they go in search of rizq in the morning and come back with their bellies full. That is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, he narrates, it's reported in Tirmidhi, that قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لو أنكم كنتم توكلون على الله حق. That if you were to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the reliance He is due, then what happens? يتوكله لرزقتم كما ترزق الطير تغدو خماصا وتروح بطانا. That if you were to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the right of reliance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way you are meant to rely upon Allah, the way you are meant to make tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you do that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you rizq, will give you provision like He gives rizq to the birds. Rasulullah gave an example of birds. Like the birds, they fly in the morning. Rasulullah is saying that كَمَا تُرْزَقُ الطَّيْرُ تَغْدُو خِمَاسًا. That they go in the morning with empty stomachs. They fly in the morning with empty stomachs. But وَتَرُوحُ بِطَانًا. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take them back with their bellies full at the time of dusk. So this is how your tawakkul should be. They don't have anything. They don't have any sources, any means like the humans have. But they have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with that, they have their efforts. We don't just rely that, we don't just say that, okay, I am having tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not putting any effort. This is also wrong. We need to have tawakkul with effort. There is no like a doubt that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not give you without effort. If you think that that is even wrong. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam have always encouraged us to put effort in our lives. If you see the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, from the start till the end, his life was full of efforts, full of strives. Every time he used to put his efforts. This is what we need to take from his life. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam have always put his effort in his life. So it goes hand in hand, the tawakkul and the effort. I give an example of a cab driver. If you see a cab driver, he's standing on the street. He's saying, I have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he's not moving his car. He's just waiting. He's saying that, okay, I'm having tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he's missing the customer who is just standing around the corner of the street. And then there is one more person that he is just revolving around the city, roaming around the city, but not having tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even that is misleading. So it goes hand in hand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you to make efforts and put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to do this. That you have to make an effort, you have to strive for your life and for the hereafter, and then you have to have that tawakkul, the reliance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is an example, as I said. He is an example of what a mutawakkil is, about how a person should keep his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like an example of the migration when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was migrating to Medina from Mecca. His migration is a prime example of how a person should rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with efforts. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he was migrating to Medina, he made all the efforts that's humanly possible. He made all the efforts. He arranged a guide. He arranged for the provisions. He asked Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu to sleep on his bed. He took Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala with him. And when he was there near the cave of Thawr, we know that. When they were at the cave of Thawr, the Ghar of Thawr, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, O Messenger of Allah, should they bow down if the kuffar, because they were doing the ta'aqqub, they were behind them, the kuffar, we know that. And even at the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu was sleeping, there were kuffar that were surrounding them. All around there were kuffar and they want to kill them. But Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu was sleeping on the bed of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on the night of Hijrah. And here Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he was with Rasulullah and he's saying, he's fearing about the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He's saying that, Ya Rasulullah, if they were to bow down and look at their feet, they can see us. But Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, after arranging and making all those efforts, he was having tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was calm and he was calming down his friend. Because this is the reason why Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala an is known as, in Urdu we say, Yar Ghar, the friend of the cave. We call him Yar Ghar, the friend of cave. When he was fearing about the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala depicted this scene in the Quran. إِلَّا تَنْصُرُوهُ فَقَدْ نَصَرَهُ اللَّهُ إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا ثَانِيَ اثْنَيْنِ إِذْ هُمَا فِي الْغَارِ. When he was fearing of the enemies, that they will harm Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam calmed him down and showed his tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Rasulullah said, إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. Do not fear, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. This is what tawakkul is. He knew that if the enemy would bow down, they will see us. Yet he has that belief on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that no one can harm us when Allah is with us. La tahzan, inna Allah ma'ana. So we need to have the tawakkul, as I said. And I mentioned a few things that if you want to prosper your rizq, if you want to increase your rizq, you need to have a few things. You need to do some things that you can increase your rizq through that. I said you have to pray on time. You have to pray. You have to pray salat. You have to make istighfar. You have to make istighfar. Ask for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I gave examples from the Quran. If you make istighfar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase your rizq. And you have to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have to send salawat upon the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There is one more thing that we need to notice. Maybe we are missing that in our lives. If we see that we are not having the rizq that we are meant to be, and we are missing that provision in our life, we need to notice about this thing, that are we maintaining our family ties? Are we good with our relatives? Are we maintaining the kinship? That is very important. That is very important. And if you maintain your family ties, if you are good with your relatives, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that your rizq will increase. If you want your rizq to be increased, you have to notice, are you maintaining your good relations with your parents, with your brothers and sisters, with your cousins? It's very important. It will prosper your rizq. It's reported in Musnad Ahmad. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu an, he narrated عن علي رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من سره أن يمد له في عمره ويتوسع له في رزقه. Rasulullah said that whoever would like to increase his lifespan, if you want your lifespan to be increased, and if you want your provision to be extended, Rasulullah said, if you want your provision, your rizq to be extended, what you have to do? You have to do that. وَيُوَسَّعَ عَلَهُ فِي رِزْقِهِ وَيُدْفَعَ عَنْهُ مِيتَةُ السُّوءِ. And one more thing, if you want to ward off a bad death, if you want that there should be no bad death to you that comes to you, then what you have to do is فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهِ. Then fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to be God conscious. And وَلْيَصِلْ رَحِمَهُ. And you have to uphold the ties of kinship. You have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and uphold the ties of kinship. Ibn Umar radiallahu anh, he said that man ittaqa rabbahu wa wasala rahimahu unsi'a lahu fi umrihi wa taramaluhu wa ahabbahu ahluhu. Ibn Umar radiallahu anh said that whoever has taqwa in his Lord and maintains ties of kinship, he is good with his relatives, what happens? His term of life will be prolonged. Your life will be extended, lifespan. There will be barakah in your life. Your lifespan will be extended, and his wealth will be abundant. If you want your wealth to be abundant, you have to maintain that family ties. You have to be good with your parents. You have to be good with your brothers and sisters and people around you and your relatives. We see today people, they are not concerned about their relatives, but there are so many ayats and ahadith that say that you have to be good with your relatives. We see Abdullah ibn Salam radiallahu anh, who was a Jewish alim. I have said this earlier, that Abdullah ibn Salam radiallahu anh, he was a Yahudi alim. He was a rabbi. But when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam migrated from Mecca to Medina, he had this urge to accept Islam. But he wanted something from Rasulullah. He wanted to hear something amazing from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the first was that he heard from Rasulullah. When Rasulullah came to Medina, Rasulullah said, Afshu salam. Make salam to everyone. Greet everyone, every Muslim brother and sister. Afshu salam. Wa at'imu ta'am. And feed people. Feed people around you. It doesn't matter if he's poor or wealthy. Feed the people around you. Wasilul arham. And the ties of kinship should be maintained. Maintain the ties of kinship. Very important thing. Unfortunately, today the Muslims are not concerned about their relatives. We have to know the importance of the ties of kinship. And the other thing is charity. If you want to prosper your rizq, make voluntary donations. Make charity. It does not decrease your wealth. It increases your wealth. Why? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ma naqasat sadaqatun min malin." that your donations, your charity will not decrease your wealth. It increases your wealth. Make voluntary donations. And at last, you have to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be grateful. Be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every time. It doesn't matter if you are poor or wealthy. In every situation, you need to be thankful. You need to be a shakir to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? If you're not a shakir, if you're not grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then be ready for the punishment. Allah is saying, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you're grateful, I will increase you. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you're grateful to me, I will increase you. It means I will increase everything. I will give blessings. I will put barakah in your wealth. I will put barakah in your awlad, in your offspring. But if you're ungrateful, وَلَإِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. Then wait for the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're ungrateful, verily the azab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very, very severe. Then wait for that azab. We see that people are ungrateful. Why? Because we see people that's superior to us. Like we mentioned in our khatira last night, this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave us this remedy, how to overcome this disease. This is actually a disease, to be ungrateful. If you're ungrateful, remember your rizq will not prosper. Never your rizq will be prosper. Your rizq, your wealth will not be increased. Never. If you're ungrateful, you have to be grateful at any cost. So to overcome this disease, Rasulullah gave us a remedy. Rasulullah said that unzuru ila man huwa asfala minkum wa la tanzuru ila man huwa fawqakum. That you see, look at those people, look at those who are inferior to you. We know this hadith. Look at those who are inferior to you, and do not look at those who are superior to you. In terms of worldly matters, in terms of wealth, in terms of worldly wealth, that do not look at people who are inferior to you. Do not look at people who have branded cars and sky-high buildings. Don't look at those people. Look at those who are inferior to you, who don't have any home, who don't have anything to prosper. So we need to understand that if you do that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that if you look at people who are superior to you, then you will be in a matter that everything that comes to you, you will be belittling those favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to understand that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that we need to look at people who are inferior to us, who don't have anything. We need to look at them and make shukr, be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you be thankful to me, I will increase in your wealth. And the last thing is ask for blessing, ask for barakah. Ask for barakah. I'll always say, Allahumma barik lana. Barakah is very important. If you see, if you have wealth and don't have barakah in that wealth, even that is useless. Because the wealth will not be enough if there is no barakah. The offspring will not give you the life, the enjoyment of the life if you don't have the barakah in your life. So the rizq that comes to you is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the raziq. Always ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give barakah. Always ask ilm from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always ask that your offspring to be obedient to you. That is what we need to ask. Rizq is not something, as I said earlier, the rizq is not something that is just with the food, that is just related with the food or grocery things. Rizq is something, if you have obedient children, even that is a rizq. If you have lovely spouses, even that is a rizq. If you have good parents, that is a rizq. If you have wealth, that is a rizq. Everything that is good is rizq. So ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the raziq and who is the razzaq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase in our rizq and increase in the halal way possible. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon our family and friends. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغِ. 5 minutes for sunnah prayer.